Glare doesn't exist. I like gray anyway. It kind of gets into that. Thank y'all. Thank you so much, Linda. Thank y'all for letting me come. And especially when you don't even know what I'm going to talk about. That means life is fun for me. You know a lot. And feel free to volunteer and tell if you need to. But I remember last year, well, the 3 years before, I've talked about each of the memoirs I'm working on. And yes, I'm still slow. And so I am still working on all three of them. And now I'm also working on opening up my own website. And so it'll just be under my normal name, Kay Robinson Calloway, and it should be open by the end of this month at the latest. And it really has no real purpose other than it talks about the books and some of our traveling and my husband's awesome pictures, some of them from when we travel. And it's just what I feel led to do as I am working on the memoirs. But what I am going to talk today has very little to do with that. The name I called my speak today, my speech, however you want to phrase it, is Coronavirus becomes Corona Kindness. So, it is about something we are all extremely familiar with, but maybe a few different memories that you haven't thought of in a while. But the bottom line, the whole concept of coronavirus, we are so used to that. And then I came up with Corona Kindness, because a virus is negative and it is aggressive, and kindness is positive, and it's a choice. When bad things happen, and that includes coronavirus, there is always good if we look for it, if we choose to focus on good things in the midst of hard times. So quickly, the old teacher in me kind of comes out, and a little bit of the historical parts. The history of epidemics. Short and sweet, not too long. But remember reading, knowing about way back. I'm starting not forever back because we don't have time frames from there, and I would go forever to talk about it. But in the 1340s, in English, that was the first, in England, that was the first record that I know of that started with the bubonic plague. And we all remember hearing about bubonic plagues and how bad they are. And where they sort of came from was the flies and the rats, but at that time they didn't even know what it was about. But it was very rough. And that was in 1340, so we'll start about 1300. Add 300 years. See how quick I can go? Add 300 years. And in the 1660s, all during that time period, it was not only England, but it was Europe. And it was bubonic plague again. And it hit as hard as it had before. And this time, because of more history. In England, in their island, I'll put it into the whole British area, they lost over 1,500 people. 1,500 people. And that's in that little island. You know, that's smaller than our state in Texas. And they lost that many people. So it was a very strong pandemic, terrible thing that happened to them. If you think about the 1600s, I'm going to throw something at you. And I do want you to raise your hand. You don't have to if you don't want to. But how many of y'all remember, I remember, that little kids thing we used to say, ring around the rosy, pocket full of posy, ashes, ashes, we all fall down? Everybody? Okay. That makes me feel better. And we all just, as kids even, it was just kind of a little thing you do, and you could hold hands. Do you know what it was based on? It was based on the bubonic plague. Yeah. I learned this when I was teaching English. The whole thing, the ring around the rosy, the whole way that started when you knew somebody was sick, is that the first sign of infection was a rosy area, a rosy rash, and it usually was in a ring of some sort. The second line, pocket full of posy. What did they start doing, thinking it might help? They would always, in pockets, anywhere on them, in their hands, in their hats, wherever they could. They would put posies. They would put flowers that smelled good. They could be dead flowers, but it was the whole idea of herbs, of fragrant things that they were hoping would keep the negative disease from them. So that's the pocket full of posies. The thing that we always say, we Americans, ashes, ashes, it really comes from the word atishu. It's English, atishu. So it's atishu, atishu. We said ashes, ashes. For them, it was their word for sneezing. Achoo, atishu. And the atishu, atishu, that when people started sneezing, they were going to die. And then we all fall down. We all die. So, again, serious. You know, we think of it as something that was bad, but then you try to reenact the best way we can to respect the pain that they went through in their difficult times. You go on up to, we're talking about the 16th century, stretch it a little bit into the 17th, and that was the first time that doctors in Europe, a doctor specifically, I think, but then it spread around, started the whole concept of masks. You remember the old pictures of, it's like a bird-like mask, and they would put two things of glass to use like glasses on it. It went all around your face, and then it had a beak coming out, and they would make two holes in the beak. And the reason they had that long beak, like a bird, was because they filled that entire beak then with what? Roses, posies, flowers, anything. It could be spices. It could be, they used a lot of, now I can't even say it. I have to look things up. Lavender. Lavender was one of their favorite ones, you know, that was healthy in a good way. And so they would fill all of that up because the doctors are trying to understand what's going on and trying to help these people, but they know the closer they get to them, the more likely they will catch it. And so that was when masks began. Also, in that same time, they started using, I didn't bring one with me because we all have. Just think outside, a stick, a wooden stick. And they would use wood and they would use sticks. And so if I were coming up to you, I'm gonna have on one of these things, so whenever I breathe, I would have a mask on. They didn't call it that at that time. But I would have a stick, and I could move your arm. I could change the position if that person can't talk as well. Or if they can talk, they would tell them what to do as much as they could. But the whole idea of the stick prevented them from touching that person, which in the long run became the whole idea of using gloves. So our doctors and our nurses, all that started in the 17th century as a product of a negative, terrible thing going on. So that you think of, okay, we'll say 1600. So add 300 years to that. What do we come up with? The 1900s. Now that stretches a lot for us. However, remember the 1980s? What was our epidemic at that time? That's right. HIV, AIDS, all of it. Remember, all of us in here are old enough to remember the fear that was going on at that time. Oh my goodness. We're talking about fears. The CDA was in effect at that time trying to figure out what it was, trying hard. As they figured it out, not even first, I won't go in direct order, but our memories and the history, they knew it had to do with blood sometimes. So if anybody's bleeding, you don't touch their blood. You know, this is the concepts. If they also knew it had to do something with fluids, you know? And so it wasn't just sneezing, but it was just like, remember the thing, maybe y'all don't, my weird memory, but if you go into any public bathroom, you do not sit on it. Because there's fluid, there could be fluid on that, and if you're sitting on it, oh my gosh, that fluid could get on you, and then you're gonna get it and you're gonna die. These are serious fears that we had. And at that time, it was don't hug. So they started thinking, well, obviously don't use any more drugs. You know, they were very upset about the heroin primarily. because that also taught them that the needles, if they're used in someone that has that disease and they're reused and reused and reused, all it does is keep spreading that disease. They knew about sexual things at that point once they got into fluids, and they're trying to figure out, okay, now what's what and who's getting it. So you don't hug anybody, you don't touch anybody, especially if you know they're sick. But even if you're afraid they're sick, you just back off and you don't do that. This was our fear, naturally fear. They found out it began in Africa. They found out that it was mostly homosexual men. So as they're finding these things out, what do we as general people start doing? Stay away and judge. You know, I remember when I started teaching, it was late mid-1980s. Anyway, at that time I was teaching, and this is when this was really kicking in too. And I remember I wanted a guy, a homosexual guy, who was not a friend, but I found one, that came and talked to my class to teach them not to have fear. Because at that point we knew by just touching someone, you're not going to catch it. However, we still did that. Because what if I had a cut on my hand? And what if he had a cut on his hand? And I held his hand. Oh my gosh, I could get it and die. So I had him come talk to me. I got permission. They debated it, but they let me have someone come into my class and speak to my kids to know it's a human that has a heart and has love as much as we do. And yes, I shook his hand, you know, and yes, I hugged him. And one time, about 10 years later, I was in Africa. One of my friends, she used to teach here. I don't know if y'all remember Hope. Well, it was Chris. You know, she has all these different names, but she taught here for a while, coached here. And I went when she ended up going to Rwanda, and she has her own ministry there. And our ministry initially was for the women that had been prostitutes so long after they had their problem with killing so many people. But I remember then it became a tribe because those women had so many kids. We have to teach the kids, you know. And so I went over there to help one time, and the kids, one of them, he was running around so cute, and he fell over and he hit his head pretty hard enough it was bleeding. And my initial thing is, I don't care if I get it. I am not gonna let this kid just bleed. And it taught me, you know, that kid probably doesn't even remember hitting his head that hard, but it taught me how to value my life. It is with wisdom, but it's with love. Anyway, so going on down, and I did my little research again since it started and until more or less today, we have had 700,000 people die in our country due to that. 700,000. Did we get the emphasis back then? Did we have the caring back then? Perhaps we did. Perhaps we didn't. But it's still going on. It is slower. It is much more controlled because now we know more. And now there are more vaccines and things. Even in Rwanda, they give them free to their people if they will go up there and get it, because almost everybody has it in Rwanda. So that was, we can't go 300 years, we can't go 100, we can barely go 20 years. And this is when coronavirus comes around, last year, 2020. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What a different world. Because this time, this virus is worldwide. It is not just us we're thinking about as much. Yes, so is the HIV and all that, but it was not as famous and not as quickly communicated back then. And now it's very much. The virus that we have found about, they have found about. CDC is still working. They are coming up with all ideas. They constantly change their ideas because they're learning. They are trying to help people. You know, now we've got the vaccines. I don't know if any of y'all have gotten it yet. I don't have the opportunity, but I know people that are starting to. You know, we're hoping this works, But it is also like the flu. It does mutate. It will change. But if you get flu shots, every year there's going to be a slightly different flu shot. And you either get it if you choose to or you don't. But it's for your own safety usually with the flu shots. This time it's trying to be more universal, more everybody's safety for those that can get it. But if you can't, you can't. They know now it began in China, The virus itself is basically my simple version. So if I'm doing it wrong, you can correct me. But it is droplets in the air, minuscule. And most of the time, it is caught when sick people cough or sneeze, and it just kind of floats around. And that's the whole concept they've come up with, the masks and things like that. And we will not get into the debates because it's kind of fun to debate about everything. But, whether they work or not, or which one or what, or just, we're still learning. Everybody is still learning. Remember back in the day, last year, before this happened, and I'll admit it was me too. Remember how many Asian, especially girls, but Asian people, if you go to an airport, you see them wearing masks, and you're just going, why in the heck are they doing that? And last summer, a year ago, in 19, Curtis and I went to, thankfully we went on a trip, but we ended up being in Singapore with some of his friends, and they became my friends, Singaporeans. And I asked her, after being there a couple days, and you really can love someone and trust them, and they know you enough to know that you don't mean it wrong if it comes off wrong. But I asked her, I said, why is it that so many Asians wear it? What really is it about? And she said, it's pretty much two things. You've either been sick and you don't want to get other people sick, or you're around people and you don't want to get yourself sick. She said, it's bottom line what it is. But it is so common, it is their choice, but they started making ones that were pretty. It became designed before all this hit. And so the richer people could have prettier ones that were drawn and designed and all these things. Interesting. But, let's see, what I read today is, since it all started, roughly, that we knew about it last February, January, depends on who you are and how far up you are, we have lost 400,000 people that have died in our country. However, we have had 26 million people that have had it and are fine. Fine being very flexible, but they have survived. So you have to compare yourself again. 26,000 versus 26 million, excuse me. Again, there's not good or bad, it just helps us understand things. When all this hit too, the governments started controlling their country in the right way. Look at a lot of them. You can't come here. We had even hoped we could even go, I've never been to Australia. Australia. And we were going to try to go about this time, and boy, they closed their places. Why? Different places close it to protect their people. The governments in general are governments. They are about power, but they are also about their people, and they wanted to protect them. Going on, states control their states in our country. It depends on where you are. Then you go into counties, and then you go into cities. The control varies on where you are, but it is a combination of helping people and power. The traveling quarantines this summer, Curtis was in one of his past students' wedding. He was going to be the groomsman, and his best man. It's like a father almost to this guy. And they were going to get married out in New Mexico, anyway, I can't say the name of the place. But anyway, so we were going to go this summer, and within 2 weeks before the wedding, that's when New Mexico said, if you come in our state, you can come in, but you have to be quarantined for 2 weeks. And it's like, crud, we don't have 2 weeks to do that and can't afford it and all those things. So then they ended up moving last minute their wedding into Texas, And it was still great. But that's the kind of things, you have to be able to be flexible. You have to figure out what to do. The masks. Now we are all wearing them when we have to. Some of us are more independent and feel like the government's telling us what to do and we're doing all this. And some of us are more afraid. And some of us, everybody makes their own choice. This is life. This is us as independent people. But we have that. We have the social distancing. 3 feet, 6 feet, who knows how many feet. And it's changed since last year, and it's still changing. Businesses, you know, we're going to close them down. We got to stop it. We got to quit. That'll stop everything. No, it doesn't, you know. But it stops a lot of businesses, especially small ones. It's hurt a lot of things. Restaurants, bars. I never still have understood why they have bars closed longer than restaurants. But anyway, it's everybody's choices that's in government. But the whole thing is we're trying to help people, but then it ends up hurting people. And how do people make these decisions? These are lockdowns. Oh my goodness. Every country had lockdowns. Media. You talk about control. You talk about power. You know, you watch the news. How much do you get good news? None, usually. Really. And so all it does is cause fear in people. And so then they watch more news, and then they have more fear because they believe more. This is in general, and I'm not judging necessarily, but sometimes I am. And so with media, I admit, I'm very frustrated with a lot of that. You can talk about politics, but that's another thing. I judge all of that, and I don't want to talk about all that. It doesn't matter. It's still control and help. How do they balance? What I want to do, now that we all know, you already knew, coronavirus, let's make it something different. Let's make it corona kindness. Okay, how many of y'all know how they came up with the name of coronavirus? My first thought, of course, was Corona the beer? What? I like it, but anyway. But I knew that phrase was Corona, you know. And I don't know if you know that beer even, but have you ever seen their little logo on it? What is it? Does anybody know how to describe it on the beer? It's, if I could draw, it's like a little thing like this, and it has little sticks on it. Corona comes from Latin and from Greek, and what it means is crown of thorns. It's a crown on Corona the beer, but it's a crown of thorns is what it meant back in the day. What does that make you think of? Or who? Jesus. What day is next week today? No? Well, is it on the 14th? No, you're getting close though. Next week, a day from today, is Ash Wednesday. And Ash Wednesday, you know, is the beginning of Lent. And whether or not, you know, you're involved with any of this, it is the same concept because we know, whether it be Ash Wednesday, whether it be Lent, we know Easter's coming, you know, other than, you know, Valentine's Day, that's kind of the next thing we think about. Well, there's a few others. But Easter is coming. But remember who wore the crown of thorns? Jesus. You start thinking about that and relate that with coronavirus. The reason they chose that is because the virus themselves, the outside of it, if you want to call it, it's not outside, that's the wrong word, I wrote it down. The surface of that has all these little spikes. And those little spikes look like crown of thorns. And that's why they named it that. And a virus is obviously negative because we catch it and it makes us sick. But what I encourage you to do, if you do anything for Lent, usually it's about 40 days, but you could do it yourself. And yes, you can do all the things you normally do, but this, instead of, make it positive. Just what I've been doing this year, it's something God put on my heart, not with Lent, but just the end of each day. I'm terrible at journaling. I should be great, and I'm terrible. But at the end of each day, I write one thing, and it can be just even a couple of words, or it can be one sentence, or it can get into a paragraph and I get fired up. But it has to be one positive thing that I saw or experienced that day. One positive thing. If you do that for Lent, if you do that for 40 days, from now until Easter, whatever you want to do it, it'll help you start looking for the positive things, for miracles in your life, for the visions you see, for just hearing. It's just amazing. So just consider that. All humans live on holy ground. You know, God made this place. He made us. We should focus on positive things. There's a verse I had not really thought of like this before, all this coronavirus. It's in Psalm 34:2. I live and breathe God. I live and breathe God. What does that mean? Does that mean you're not going to get sick? No. But it means He's with you. And if He allows it, there will be good in it. When bad things happen, we know that everything in our life, every detail in our day can have good if we seek it, if we look for it, if we ask, if we have our mindset looking for positive things instead of negative, you start seeing them abound. So you can at least say one a day if you just think about it. So you think of Corona, kindness. Do we have judgment against sexual gender of people because of Corona? No. We don't have coronavirus even. We do not judge anybody by their sexuality. If it's male, female, whatever. We do not judge people by their age. Old, young. You know, we thought at first it was mostly the old people. Then we thought, oh no, it's the kids. Then we think, oh no, it's us. We don't judge because we don't know and we're still learning. We don't judge the country. A lot of people, oh, it's from China. The China people, even if it is, it would be government. We don't blame. It's just like we don't judge. That's the thing of it being wildly universal. Everybody is suffering from this like we are. And so you learn to love everybody like we love ourselves. You think of the good things that have happened already in the last year. What do so many people do? And I'm thinking of my daughters, but a lot of y'all's kids, grandkids. What do they do when they do their jobs? Do they have to go to work? A lot of them do, but a lot of them now stay at home and work. They do it through the internet. They now don't have to get dressed up and drive for 45 minutes to get to work and then live in a place all day for 8 hours with people that you may or may not like and then drive home for 45 minutes and then come home and now you're back with your family. They don't have to do that, a lot of people. I'm just looking for positive aspects. Now the big businesses realize it's beneficial to them. They save money. And before they were like, oh no, we can't do that. Maybe one day a month you can take off. You know, now it's just become a very common situation. That's huge for the next generation. Same thing about churches. A lot of people, oh, it's terrible because we can't go to church. Yeah, you can focus on that. But what are the positive things? Oh my goodness, now you can watch them online. So many churches wouldn't do that before and didn't. And now it can be live online, but they are recorded. Now Mom is not here. That's why I'm recording myself. Love you, Mom. But you don't have to be there. And you can watch so many more churches around the world that you could not have done last year. I mean, those are the things that are amazing. And do you have to dress up and look right to go to church? No, you can be in your pajamas and walk to church. It's just.
As long as it's not Zoom and you turn your camera on.
You do have to be careful. That's a very good point. I'll get to Zoom in a minute, but you're exactly right. Be careful. But no, I think it's great. And it's even like funeral ceremonies. You know, we've lost people, everybody, you lose people you love. And sometimes you can go, and sometimes it's limited, and sometimes you can't. But they are now doing those usually live. And they are now also often recording those. My cousin, when she died, I watched it live. You know, I couldn't go because they had it limited. It's just because they don't want to. Just look at the positive side. It can be joy. And then you can cry and you don't have to worry about makeup messing up. You know, it's all these things. The Zoom, that's exactly what you said. They're always negative, and we all learn the hard way is how most of us learn, at least that's how I do. But the cool part is the FaceTime on your phone, how you can do it, it's kind of like Zoom, but it's a different thing just with your phone. Now, so many people are talking to family members and good friends because you can't go maybe out of your house and go talk to them, but you can call and talk on the phone, but now you can also see them and talk back and forth. At Christmas time, my niece, Craig's daughter, and her husband, they both had coronavirus. They found out like 2-3 days beforehand. They called up and, they can't come, they're sick. They also don't want to get everybody else sick. But what we do, we're all at the table, all of the rest of us are at the table, and they held up a phone, and we talked to them. And so they had Christmas with us in that sense. We never have done that before. We could have, we just didn't think about it. We would just feel bad and when they couldn't come or somebody else couldn't come. It's like, oh, I miss them. But now there's ways to make a difference. You see people around the world more common, and you can share your love with people more common. Another positive thing, so many people do stay at home, and again, a lot of people, it depends on their choices. But trying to look at the positive, especially with kids in schools. And now a lot of those parents are actually teaching their kids, or they realize what the teachers should be teaching their kids, and they have to do a portion of that. And then they start spending more time with their own kids instead of just paying to have them go or glad they went. Now they are starting to really learn about their kids again. And same thing with their spouses. Instead of going off to work, you're with those people. Yes, it's an adjustment, but to me, I think that's a great adjustment because you start loving people more that you already loved, but now you get them. Now, just like playing, playtime, you call it that, but they have sold more puzzles and more books and audiobooks in the last year than they have sold, I think, in hundreds of years. It has gone crazy, but that's good. Instead of just sitting and watching TV all the time or just not doing anything. Going outside, that's been one fairly safe thing. You could go outside more often, and people are walking outside. They're going out to God's land instead of just living their whole lives in human-made places. Yes, it's nice to have human-made places. I am glad we have air conditioning and heating, but to go outside and see all those things. One thing we did, I was telling some of y'all last month, we love to travel. We're blessed that we've been able to travel a lot, but this year there's nowhere to go outside of our country. I love that I've seen a lot of our country, but we couldn't go anywhere else. Well, I was getting a little itchy, and God put in my mind, thankfully, in fall, something I've always wanted to do. And so we drove up to Minnesota, and we went dog sledding for like 4 days. And we stayed in a yurt. And it was like Curtis and me and our young guide and a bunch of dogs. And that's all we were with for 4 days. And we also went ice fishing. These are 2 things I've always wanted to do in my life since I heard about them. And I never took time to go because, I want to go to some other country. I want to do this. It's here. And it was close enough to drive. And it was safe. And it's like, thank you, God, for giving me that opportunity to enjoy the cold, beautiful world that he made. It's gorgeous. Another thing, Curtis and I went last weekend. Actually, it's kind of last minute, but we drove to New Mexico. And we went to a certain place. It's the Bosque del, I don't know if I can say it, Bosque del, anyway, I want to say Navajo, and it's not. It's the other one. Anyway, it's a place that has national care. It's a wildlife refuge. Thank you. You got to give me those words when I can't say them. That's what friends are for. It's a refuge. And so we went because it was the end of the season, but we got there because we got to go that weekend quickly and saw the whole bird migration. Oh my goodness, I have never seen anywhere near that many. They were snow geese by the thousands. And there were also cranes. We are talking the sandhill cranes, those huge, they're as big almost as I am, really. They are huge, thousands. And you're sitting there, you get up early and you go in the morning and they're all in the water. And I videoed it, I would show you, but to hear them and they're talking and then it gets so loud and then they're flying just right over you and the beauty in them and how they're made to fly and they're even how they fly around in like moving like this. It's like us walking in New York or something. We walk everywhere, we don't run into people, but we see the birds and we're like, how do they do that? It's the way they're made, you know? And it's gorgeous. Those are things I don't think we would have ever done if it hadn't been for all of this. So again, Corona, kindness. See and feel God's love in the midst of pain. Bad things happen. And I don't know how many of y'all, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I know at least a few of y'all and a lot of my friends have had coronavirus, have experienced it. And you're just going, oh, it's so sad. But there is good. Those of y'all that have had it and lost your sense of smell, that's not a good thing in itself. However, it is, because when you couldn't smell, I've never experienced that I remember. And you appreciate smelling once it starts coming back. It's the same thing with tasting. I love to eat. And because the taste is just, it could go forever and I'd be happy. But when you lose that, it makes you truly appreciate what we have. It's those kinds of things. Once you get out of it, like us, I have not had it. I'm extremely grateful. When you get well, you're grateful you're well because you've been through it and you know what it felt like. When you get well, you're grateful that you didn't get someone else sick because you quarantined yourself. Or, you know, it's those things. You just have to be grateful for things that most people just see as negative. The places that people have to stay, you know, our senior citizen homes, housing, and you couldn't go see them. You can't go see them very often. Yes, it's heartbreaking, but don't you pray for them more? Don't you call them more when you can? You can at least wave at them. They're still visual occasionally, but your prayers increase. My prayers increase whenever it's people you cannot go to in person. God is there with them. If you pray, it's just as well and better, actually, than if you go yourself. Same thing with hospitals. You know, I took a friend who has cancer down to MD Anderson. She let me go with her. I stayed with her in the hotel, but I couldn't even go in the hospital. You know, you have to drop them off and all this. You pray for that person who's going through the pain, but you pray for the nurses, the doctors, all the people in there that are going through this. Curtis's daughter is a nurse in Dallas. She had not come home to see her mother or her grandmother in a year because that's what she works with, are the people that are sick like this. But you pray for them. You pray for them to find joy in their lives in the midst of what they do. Basically, we should all turn our fear into our faith. Instead of being afraid of getting it, we just have faith that we're doing the best we can, but if we get it, that's God's will, then we'll wing it as it goes. And if it's our time to go to heaven, heck, to me, that's good. That's good news. So, as I was going through, well, one other thing. Your age in life, again, is irrelative. The older I get, you know, I'm still feel like I'm 25 a lot of times. I think if I ever turned 100, I'm still gonna feel like that. You know, I don't know if that's mentality, you know, or what, but we all know that when you have kids, when you have babies, and they've got then their kids, and then their teenagers. They are constantly changing, right? Just about the time you figure them out, then they change a new way, and they just keep growing physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, everything. You just love seeing them grow. And then they get grown up and adult, and what happens to us then? We get stuck. We get stuck. And then we start complaining because we're getting old. And my belief is if you're alive, you have a purpose to live on this earth. And so our challenge as adults is to figure out, what is your purpose? Everybody's is different. But that means God wants you individually to figure out, what can you do to make life better? If you make life better for other people, if you do what God wants you to do, it makes your life better. One last little thing, the teacher part of me. 4-letter words, you know? When you say that, lots of times you think of words you're not going to say, you know? And with coronavirus, there's a lot of those words. Well, really not a lot. But you have what? Fear, mask, sick, hate, dead, or died. That's what you think of 4-letter words with coronavirus. With corona kindness, it still deals with corona, but it's walk, cook, draw, sing, help, talk, hope, live, life, love. See your miracles daily. See things beautiful daily. Write them down, just a 1-line thing. And if you do that, you are creating your future memory of coronavirus. It will become corona kindness. So do not let fear control coronavirus. Learn to love corona kindness.